Okay, I'm going to talk about something a little different today, or a different kind of book than I normally talk about. Mostly, I decided to do this right now because my children tried to get me with a whoopee cushion today. It's April 1st. They have an obsession with trying to get me with whoopee cushions. I really don't understand why, but it's really of high interest to them to trick me or whatever. So I recently finished, totally off subject, kind of off subject, Jermey Wade's book, River Monsters, True Stories of the Ones That Didn't Get Away. Okay, this is, Jermey Wade has a show, I'm not sure what it's on, Discovery or something, I'm sorry if that's wrong, River Monsters, right? He goes out and like on remote locations and catches these sort of like fabled fish. People are like, oh, there's this giant man-eating fish or something down there, right? And he's going to catch it and bring it up so we can see it. And I really enjoyed the show, and there was a deal on the book a while back, and I picked it up and finally read it. So I like the show, and I like the book. I mean, I guess maybe I'm supposed to say that. I like the book. But I just think and this isn't that the book is a joke, but it's kind of interesting that like there's this energy about these fish, right, that are out there that people have all this energy about that are sort of like, the show and Jermey Wade sort of, I guess, I don't want to say his crusade, but sort of what he does is sort of to debunk that. He's sort of like, well, we all have this fear about this thing. Let's bring it up and photograph it and look at it and show everyone this is what it is. Let's talk about the truth, not like try and scare each other. And so the show does that, and I think the book does that too, but it gets you a lot more depth because it goes into the history of like this lake in England, for example, where there's these certain fish that would grow and different things could happen and different events that would happen. And it's just really fascinating to me to sort of like to hear about these things that are kind of like nightmare fuel. I mean, I don't know if anybody else would feel this way, but you're like, oh my God, I don't want to go in any water that's around that thing. So that's kind of what's going on. But in addition to that, it's like he also sort of like says, well, it's, everybody has this energy about this, but really the fish acts like this. It's just an animal. There's not this stuff that we think it's going to do, or that it does. It just isn't real. It doesn't do those things. It's not like that, right? And so I really love that that's what he does. I love that he sort of takes these myths, these sort of stories, this man-eating fish, and sort of says like, yes, this fish could hurt somebody, but it normally doesn't. It's just that here's this weird scenario that happened, and that's what triggered the fish. I think he's got some criticism because he says, river monsters and it's like scaring people, but even he acknowledges that it's really just that terminology is just sort of to get you to start, get you to read the book or to watch the show, to sort of like engage with it. And then he can sort of say, yeah, it's a monster, but really it's not. It's just another animal. And I really love that that's the energy that he goes for. And the book is really well written. And I only have one critique of it, is that I don't well, at least the audiobook has no like supplementary material for any images of these fish. And so you have his description like, oh, what does that fish look like? And you're like, I don't know. There's definitely like, oh, there's no resource. I have to go search this fish up on the internet. There is a Famdom site for river monsters that have a lot of images. I'm going to link that because if you decide to read this, you should probably look at those pictures so that you can kind of say, oh, what is this fish? Oh my gosh, that fish is crazy. Cool. Otherwise, you're just kind of like, okay, what does that fish look like? And, but absolutely, like the fish he talks about are kind of scary. I mean, some of this, scary in the sense that like, oh yeah, you don't really want that. This could happen. It really could do this. This is a real thing that could happen. But is it any scarier really than like a bear or an alligator or anything else or whatever? Not really. It's no worse. It's just that you just don't it's just that we don't used to seeing them. Jermey Wade has been doing this for a while. He talks about maybe a movie or something or a show that he'd done going back into like the 80s and 90s. So he's been doing this stuff for a long time, and it's only maybe now that he's sort of gotten popularity for it, that he's sort of like come into it. His work is sort of borne fruit. It's really interesting that he was doing this stuff, going to these very remote places and catching this fish. A lot of times, without a lot of safety net or anything else, right? And it was just sort of like, it was something he was interested in and he decided to do. And I really like how he writes very intelligently about this stuff. He isn't trying to do like a gotcha moment. Maybe just the title of the show and the book are maybe the only kind of gotcha part of it. It's just to get you started. After that, it's really just a really interesting look at different aquatic life, what it looks like, what it does, how it actually acts, and what could have led to this sort of attack or this sort of event that usually there's a backstory to, right? You know, this person, historically, somebody was eaten by a fish, or somebody saw this thing, and then he sort of like catches them and weighs them and tries to not just say, well, that couldn't happen, but he actually tries to bring the fish up and take pictures of it and talk about it and measure them and really give a more scientific point of view. What could have happened, what would have happened, how these fish behave, and it really lends something to the book. It does seem a little strange to think that you would read a whole book about somebody fishing. It's much more interesting than that, and it's kind of also like a sort of a travel log and this sort of discussions and interactions that he has with native people in these different areas and how they feel about the fish. And sometimes there's a lot of anger about this creature that's maybe killed someone that they know, and how, you know, it could just be because of this scenario, because people are doing this thing upstream, and that, or something's going on downstream, or something's happening in this area of the river, and that's what led to these sorts of attacks. And it's really great that he takes the time to kind of evaluate that. And he also just says, like, you know, I really didn't want to kill this fish, but then the people who were with me were like, "Oh no, we're going to kill this thing. This isn't going to get thrown back." He doesn't really know what he's going to say, and it's like, yeah, I don't want to kill this thing. I don't want to, I want to release it back into the wild, but I don't live here. I don't have to deal with the potential of this creature attacking a child or something like that, or these people who have all their, their livelihood, the fish that they fish to survive, wiped out by this creature. I don't have to suffer that, but they do. I think that it's a very much a conservationist sort of approach, and I really appreciated that. He doesn't seem like he's always trying to release these fish, trying to do the least amount of harm and impact that he can have, and I really appreciate that attitude, and sort of like the big game hunter sort of attitude, right? I think that's a much more endearing quality about Jermey Wade and sort of the stuff that he does. It's just sort of to show us these things that we hear stories about but never really see and don't really know how much is truth and how much is just fabrication. Again, some of the stuff that he looks at is genuinely terrifying. I mean, some of the stuff is genuinely like, ooh. Like, I'm glad you wanted to go there because I sure didn't. But it's also just completely fascinating and so enjoyable. And some of these fish even kind of border on like cryptid type stuff. I think there's even a little bit of discussion of Loch Ness and everything that's going on there. And he kind of brings it up. He doesn't really lend any credence to it. I mean, yeah. I mean, there's no plesiosaur or anything like it in Loch Ness. I don't know why. It's, as a kid, I thought that was like, ooh, this is really something that could really be true. And it's just not. I mean, I'm just going to point, I'm sorry if you still think that. It's not true. It's not possible. It just isn't possible. I mean, and I love that he has this approach, although I didn't exactly get this from him, but like the loch itself is only so big, and it could not support a large enough breeding pool of plesiosaurs to actually have one in it. I mean, we would have to have existed down through the years, and no one's seen any of them until that photograph, which the guy who took that classic photograph even admitted that was complete fabrication. I mean, the guy who took on his deathbed literally said, like, oh, that's a fake. I mean, it doesn't happen. There's no thing. There's a big fish probably in there, and they think that, maybe seen from the right angle that this fish could have looked this way because of the way water interacts, with our vision. And I kind of love that. I kind of love that he does that work. I really enjoyed it. I just wish that this book had pictures in it. I don't think that I don't know that the actual print version has pictures in it either. I could be wrong about that. I think I remember looking and was like, huh? And then I thought, like, well, sometimes like audiobooks will have like a resource, like, oh, like here's a little PDF that comes with, like, oh, maybe there's a little resource that has pictures, and I did not see it. So I'm thinking, what? Why? So I had to go look up some of the stuff, and some of it is really cool. But it's just like, well, I want to see the one that you caught, So that's why that Famdom site I think would be pretty cool, because it has a lot of pictures of him doing these different things. I just don't know that they're in the actual book. If I'm wrong, the physical book has it, great, but that's a downside of the audiobook. I still think the audiobook is pretty good, but it does kind of take a hack a bit of the book off for me, as far as rating, because it's just like I can't get super excited, because it's like I wanted to see this thing. And I wanted to see it as part of the the media that I engaged with, right? I don't want to have to go and do separate research. Not that I mind it, but it's just that I'm looking for that right there. I want to see that right there. You know, I just didn't have it. Sad. River Monsters by Jermey Wade. Really a fun read. I really recommend it, even if you're not into fishing at all. Just because I think it's such a fascinating look at these different animals and the truth behind them, and that Jermey Wade has such a really great perspective on things. And he writes very well. And I should mention that the audiobook, he reads his own book, which I think is pretty nice because he narrates his own show. Anyhow, thanks for watching. My name is Virgil. This is Literally Books. If you enjoy books, you can subscribe because I talk about books. That's basically, that's my thing. That's the pitch. And I'm done talking about books for right now. So bye. So I don't know if that the April Fool's thing makes sense, but